Hello students, we are studying the chapter Traders, Kings and Pilgrims, and today we'll discuss about part 2. This is the second part of this chapter, and we'll start with the topic the story of the Silk Route. So before starting this topic we should know the meaning of Silk Route. What is Silk Route? Silk is a commodity, you know that it is one kind of textile or cloth. Silk route, the way or the path that was used by the traders earlier for carrying silk and other commodities from India, that was known as Silk Route. It was through the mountains, plain areas, and through the sea also. So these were different routes, silk routes. These were also known as silk routes, and very important ways or the paths for trade, for the international trade, because the traders carried silk, spices, and cotton textile and other essential commodities from Indian subcontinent to the western market, right? So these routes were known as silk routes. The rich glossy colors of silk as well as its smooth texture, means smooth touching, make it highly valued fabric in most societies. It means silk textile was very valuable today also. So making silk is a complicated process. It's very difficult to make silk textile. Raw silk has to be extracted from the cocoons of silkworms. You know that for producing silk, cocoons worms were used, spun into thread, and after thread is prepared and then woven into cloth. Techniques of making silk were first invented in China around 7,000 years ago. You should remember, means preparing silk textile was started in China. While the methods remained a closely guarded secret for thousands of years, some people from China who went to distant lands on foot, horseback, and on camels carried silk with them. So later, after that, silk became very famous in other parts of the world. The paths they followed came to be known as Silk Route. As I told you that what were the Silk Routes? Silk Routes means the ways or paths those were carried, means those were used by the traders and merchants to carry silk and other commodities to other countries. Sometimes Chinese rulers sent gifts of silk to rulers in Iran and West Asia, and from there the knowledge of silk spread further west. It means earlier the knowledge about silk was only in China and some other Asian countries, but later it went to west also, western countries. About 2000 years ago, wearing silk became the fashion amongst rulers and rich people in Rome. Rome is situated in Italy and it was very famous place. It was the center of Roman Empire. It was very expensive. Silk was very expensive at that time, and as it had to be brought all the way from China along dangerous roads through mountains, deserts, people living along route often demanded payments for allowing traders to pass through, because silk was very important and it was in great demand in the western market. So the traders carried silk from China and India to other countries, and they used this way or path known as Silk Route. And the Silk Route was controlled by many other kings, other rulers, and local people, and they also demanded payments for allowing the traders who carried silk, right, to pass through the way. So we can see this map which shows the Silk Route and its branches. Some kings tried to control large portions of the route. This was because they could benefit from taxes, tributes, and gifts that were brought by traders traveling along the route. Means why the kings were very interested to control Silk Route? Because the traders carried silk from these by using these ways, and so the kings means they used to take benefits as taxes, tributes, and gifts they used to take from the traders. In return, they often protected the traders who passed through their kingdoms from attacks by robbers. So in this way, the traders used to give the gifts and the taxes and other charges to the local kings and the people for protection also. The best known of the rulers who controlled the Silk Route were the Kushanas, were very famous kings of India who ruled over Central Asia and Northwest India around 2000 years ago. Their two major centers of power were Peshawar and Mathura. You can see in this map Peshawar and Mathura, two major centers of power. Takshila also, you can see in this map, Takshila was also included in their kingdom. During their rule, a branch of the Silk Route extended from Central Asia down to the seaports at the mouth of the river Indus, from where silk was shipped westwards to Roman empires. Means by using this port, silk was carried, it was shipped and carried to the western market, especially to Roman Empire. After that, the Kushanas were amongst the earliest rulers of the subcontinent to issue gold coins. You can see in this picture gold coins. These coins were started by Kushanas. These were used by traders along the Silk Route. You know that why do you think it would have been difficult to use carts along the Silk Route? Because Silk Route was not a simple or plain route, right? It was through the deserts, mountains and other difficult areas or terrains, so it was not easy for the traders to have carts for trade. Next one, the spread of Buddhism. This is the next topic of this chapter. Before starting this topic, a sculpture from the stupa at Sanchi. You can see the tree and the empty seat below it. Sculpture carved this to indicate that the Buddha had attained enlightenment while meditating under the tree. This image you can see easily. This is the empty seats you can see, and this is the tree. Now, the spread of Buddhism. The most famous Kushana ruler was Kanishka. Kanishka was the most powerful Kushana ruler, who ruled around 1900 years ago. He organized a Buddhist council. Buddhist councils were organized there where scholars met and discussed important matters. Ashwaghosa, you can see this is the image of Ashwaghosa. He was a poet who composed a biography of Buddha, Mahatma Buddha. And the name of this biography was Buddha Charita. So who wrote Buddha Charita? Ashwaghosa, right? He was a poet and lived in his court. He lived in the court of Kanishka. Ashwaghosa and other Buddhist scholars now began writing in Sanskrit language. A new form of Buddhism known as Mahayana Buddhism. This was the new form of Buddhism. You should note down Mahayana Buddhism. It was now developed. This had two distinct features. Which features? Earlier, the Buddhist presence was shown in sculpture by using certain signs. For instance, his attainment of enlightenment was shown by sculptures of the peepal tree. It was shown earlier, but now statues of the Buddha were made, right? Statues were made, and many of these were made in Mathura, while others were made in Takshila. And about both of the places we have discussed in the map. We have also seen in the map Mathura and Takshila. The second change was a belief in bodhisattvas. The first change was statues of Buddha were made, and the second change was about a belief in bodhisattvas. These were supposed to be persons who had attained enlightenment. So these people attained enlightenment, and once they attained enlightenment, they could live in complete isolation and meditate in peace. However, instead of doing that, they remained in the world to teach and help other people. The worship of bodhisattvas became very popular and spread throughout Central Asia, China, and later to Korea and Japan. It means in other Asian countries. So this was the second change, and this was about bodhisattvas. sattvas. Now, Buddhism also spread to Western and Southern India, where dozens of caves were hollowed out of hills for monks to live in. Because monks used to move from one place to another place, and later they started to live in the caves, right? So these particular places were there for monks. Some of these caves were made on the orders of kings and queens, because kings used to order to make these caves. They also protected Buddhism, they also followed Buddhism. Others by merchants and farmers. So these were often located near passes through the Western Ghats. You can see Western Ghats, roads connecting prosperous ports on the coast with cities in Deccan ran through these passes. Traders probably halted in these cave monasteries during their travels. Buddhism also spread southeastwards to Sri Lanka. These countries are located in southeastern parts, Myanmar, Thailand, and other parts of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. You can see in this map Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia. The older form of Buddhism was Theravada Buddhism. It was more popular in these areas. So here Theravada Buddhism was very popular. Now you can see this is the image, a cave at Karle. Karle is situated in Maharashtra. This one. And these are the images of the first image left, an image of Buddha from Mathura, and this one, it was found in Mathura. And second one you can see in the right, an image of Buddha from Takshila. This is the image of Mahatma Buddha found in Takshila. It was made in Takshila. Next topic is the quest of the pilgrims. Who is pilgrims? Pilgrims, as traders journeyed to distant lands in caravans and ships. Caravans, as I told you in the previous part, caravans means the traders used to move from one country to another country in the big groups known as caravans. Pilgrims often traveled with them. So with the traders, pilgrims also traveled. So pilgrims are the people who undertake journeys to holy places in order to offer worship. It means this word is connected to the religious people. The best known of these are the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims. For example, Fayan, who came to the subcontinent about 1600 years ago. You can see this is the image of Fayan. And after that, Huanzheng or Xuanzang, both are the same persons, who came around 1400 years ago, and first king, who came about 50 years after Xuanzang or Huanzhang. They came to visit places associated with the life of Buddha, as well as famous monasteries. They studied about and they wrote a lot about Mahatma Buddha. Each of these pilgrims left an account of a journey. They wrote of the dangers they encountered on their travels, which often took years, of the countries and the monasteries that they visited, and the books they carried back with them. How Fayan returned to China. This is a story about Fayan. We'll discuss later. Xuanzang, who took the land route back to China through the northwest and central Asia, carried back with him statues of Mahatma Buddha made of gold, silver, and sandalwood, and over 600 manuscripts loaded on the back of 20 horses. Over 50 manuscripts were lost when the boat on which he was crossing the Indus capsized. He spent the rest of his life translating the remaining manuscripts from Sanskrit into Chinese. So a lot of books were written by him and translated also, because originally these books were written in Sanskrit and he translated these books into Chinese language. Now, this is about how Fayan returned to China. Fayan began his journey back home from Bengal because he stayed in Bengal. He boarded a ship belonging to some merchants. They had barely traveled for 2 days when they were caught in a storm. The merchants began throwing their merchandise overboard so as to lighten the load and save the ship from sinking because they unloaded the important material and the goods carried by them. Fayan threw away his meager personal belongings but clung to his books and the statues of the Buddha that he had collected. Finally, the storm subsided after 13 days. This is how he describes the sea. And this is the description by Fayan. The sea itself is boundless in extent. It's impossible to know east or west except by observing the sun, moon, or stars in their motions. If it is dark, rainy weather, the only plan is to steer by the wind. It took him more than 90 days to reach Java, where he halted for 5 months before boarding another merchant ship that took him to China. Finally, he reached to China, and so this was the description by Fayan and how he collected the uh, sculptures and statues and important books. Nalanda. These are some villages from Nalanda. Some mazes, a unique center of Buddhist learning. Xuanzang or Huinshan and other pilgrims spent time studying in Nalanda, situated in Bihar, the most famous Buddhist monastery of the period. This is how he describes it. This is the description by Huinshan. The teachers are men of the highest ability and talent. They follow the teachings of Buddha in all sincerity. The rules of the monastery are strict and everyone has to follow them. Discussions are held throughout the day and the old and the young mutually help one another. Learned men from different cities come here to settle their doubts. The gatekeeper asks new entrants difficult questions. They are allowed to enter only after they have been able to answer these. Interestingly, 7 or 8 out of every 10 are not able to answer. So this is the description by Huinsang, that what kind of system was there in Nalanda University or Nalanda, at that time. So it was very disciplined system. Clear? Explained by Huinsang. So dear students, in this part we discussed the above topics. In the next part we'll start the beginning of Bhakti.